Good evening from the International Space Station Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. It's a full house here in Mission Control on a Sunday night, ready to support the relocation of one of the Sojuz vehicles at the International Space Station from one docking port to another. At this hour, a multinational trio of space flyers, Russian cosmonaut Alexander Skvortsov, European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano, and NASA astronaut Drew Morgan are in their Russian Sokol launch and entry suits inside the Sojuz MS-13 spacecraft that is docked to the aft port of the Zvezda service module. This activity tonight is designed for them to undock their Sojuz about 33 minutes from now and take a short spin around the block at the International Space Station to find a new parking place at the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the International Space Station. Tonight's relocation activity necessitated by the failure of the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 spacecraft to dock at the International Space Station in the wee hours on Saturday. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Here in Mission Control, two flight directors on console. The lead flight director for tonight's relocation activities for the Sojuz MS-13 is Zeb Scoville. To his left at the bottom of your screen, Flight Director Adi Bulus. And the two spacecraft communicators talking to the station crew at this hour, Neil Nagata to the right of Zeb Scoville, and Andreas Mogensen of the European Space Agency, who is a Sojuz systems expert, having flown to the station a few years ago on a Sojuz vehicle. Half a world away at the Russian Mission Control Center on the outskirts of Moscow in the town of Korolyov, Russian flight controllers in control of tonight's Sojuz relocation activity at the Russian Mission Control Center. This whole scenario of the space ballet of moving one Sojuz from one docking port to another tonight, and then 24 hours from now, another attempt to bring the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 spacecraft in for a docking to what at that point will be the vacant Zvezda service module aft port, was choreographed throughout the day on Saturday by the Russian flight control team under the direction of lead flight director Vladimir Solovyev. Throughout the day on Saturday, the International Space Station mission management team and the international partners met in a pair of meetings to discuss the pros and cons of this complex activity, and the go was finally given late Saturday afternoon to proceed with this plan to have Skvortsov manually fly the Sojuz MS-13 from the aft port of the Zvezda service module. He will back away from that docking port to a distance of about 38 meters. He'll station keep. He'll perform a roll program to rotate the Sojuz. The crew will be taking pictures of the aft port of the Zvezda service module to make sure it is free of any debris before Skvortsov manually begins a translation to the zenith side of the International Space Station, where he will again station keep for a second time about 38 meters away from the Poisk module at the top side, or the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the station, before the green light is given by Russian flight controllers for Skvortsov to manually fly the Sojuz in for a docking to Poisk. The most probable cause of the inability of the Sojuz MS-14, that's the unpiloted Sojuz that's currently flying about 168 miles behind the International Space Station, the most probable cause for its inability to have its core's automated rendezvous system, this is a replay of the Sojuz from late Friday night, early Saturday morning, as it was about 100 meters away from its docking port, unable to lock on its core's active automated rendezvous system to the passive system on the Poisk module. Russian specialists theorize that an amplifier component associated with the core system on Poisk is faulty. It will have to be replaced at a future date, but this Sojuz was aborted in its approach to the International Space Station, flew to a safe distance away from the station, where it has been moving in a racetrack trajectory around for another attempt on Monday night to redock to what at that point will be the open docking port of the Zvezda service module, which has a healthy Kors automated rendezvous system to act in concert with the system on the Soyuz itself, which is in good working order. This diagram shows the components of a Soyuz vehicle. The top portion, the orbital module, contains the docking mechanism and the rendezvous antennas and other avionics. The crew of this Sojuz MS-13, Luca Parmitano, the Soyuz commander, Alexander Skvortsov, who will be doing all the driving tonight, and NASA's Drew Morgan. They are housed in the descent module as they were for launch 5 weeks ago from the Baikonur Cosmodrome back on July 20th for their 4-orbit, 6-hour journey to the International Space Station. About 2.5 hours ago, they moved from the service module inside the Sojuz MS-13, closed the hatches, began a series of leak checks to make sure that we had an airtight seal at the docking interface between Soyuz and Zvezda, and then began to climb into their Sokol launch and entry suits and strap themselves into their respective seats. Drew Morgan is in the right seat of the descent module, to the right of Alexander Skvortsov, who, as the Soyuz commander, is in the center seat of the Soyuz vehicle. To his left is board engineer number 1, Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency, the same configuration that they were in for launch 5 weeks ago. Tonight's activity will begin with the issuance of the opening of the hooks that has held the Soyuz in place to the service module. The hook opening command will be given at 10:34 p.m. Central Time, 11:34 p.m. Eastern Time. It will take about 90 seconds for those hooks to open, and then springs on both sides of the docking interface will push off against one another, enabling the Soyuz to physically separate from the Zvezda service module. Undocking scheduled at 10:35 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time, 11:35 and 30 seconds p.m. Eastern Time. Again, the Soyuz will back away directly behind the station at a distance of about 38 meters. There'll be a brief period of station keeping before Skvortsov manually flies the Soyuz to a point 38 meters above the Poisk module. Another brief period of station keeping will ensue before he presses in for a manual docking to Poisk, the Kors automated system not required for this manual approach that Skvortsov will execute as the Soyuz commander. The docking of Sojuz MS-13 to Poisk is scheduled at 10:59 p.m. Central Time, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Once the Soyuz relocation is complete this evening, the crew in the Soyuz will conduct another series of leak checks once the hooks are closed to form a hard mate between Soyuz and the Poisk module. They will conduct those leak checks over the course of 2 orbits following the redocking to this different docking port this evening. They plan to open up the hatch back to the International Space Station shortly after 1 a.m. Central Time on Monday morning. They'll remove their spacesuits. Soyuz will be placed back on space station power, and the first act in this 2-phase activity will be complete. Again, the unpiloted Soyuz vehicle, the MS-14, that launched late Wednesday night U.S. time, Thursday morning, Baikonur time from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan. It will be making a methodical approach back toward the International Space Station throughout the day on Monday. We will be back on the air Monday night at 9:30 p.m. Central Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And the docking of the unpiloted Soyuz vehicle, which is on a test flight to test not only the booster that it was launched on, the 2.18 booster from the Baikonur Cosmodrome a few days ago, but also to test the Soyuz's upgraded guidance, navigation, and control systems and a descent control system. It will redock this time to the Zvezda service module, presumably without any issues with the Core's automated rendezvous system. That docking on Monday night, scheduled at 10:12 p.m. Central Time, 11:12 p.m. Eastern Time. The redocking of the Sojuz MS-14 to Zvezda on Monday night will come just 11.5 hours before the scheduled release of the SpaceX Dragon cargo craft from the Canadarm2 robotic arm early Tuesday morning. That release scheduled at 9:42 a.m. Central Time, 10:42 a.m. Eastern Time, to wrap up a 4.5-week stay at the station by Dragon. It is loaded with several tons of supplies to bring back to Earth, including scientific experiments, headed for a splashdown in the Pacific about 300 miles southwest of Long Beach, California, on Tuesday afternoon. A breakneck pace of activity at the International Space Station since the middle of last week. The crew continuing a complement of scientific experiments and research, but now with the added additional operational activity of this Soyuz relocation this evening, and the return of the Sojuz MS-14 for another docking attempt on Monday night, preceding the departure of the SpaceX Dragon cargo craft from the Harmony module of the International Space Station on Tuesday morning. Tonight's relocation by the Sojuz is the first since August 28th, 2015, when the crew of the Sojuz TMA-16M spacecraft, Gennady Padalka and Mikhail Kornienko of Roscosmos and NASA's Scott Kelly, in the midst of his 340-day mission in space, they conducted a similar operation, but in reverse, flying their Soyuz spacecraft at that time 4 years ago from the Poisk module for a redocking to the Zvezda module, exactly the reverse of what we are about to see Skvortsov, Parmitano, and Morgan execute this evening. The International Space Station is currently orbiting 260 miles above the Earth, just off the east coast of South America, moving from southwest to northeast in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator, soon to cross the west coast of Africa. So we're about 21 minutes away from the anticipated undocking of the Sojuz MS-13. Again, this plan was concocted by the Russian flight control team following the aborted docking attempt of the Sojuz MS-13. That's the MS-14, I should say. That's the unpiloted Soyuz spacecraft. It was unable to dock to the Poisk module as had been planned in the wee hours of Saturday morning. It was commanded to abort its approach to the station as the safety plans had called for in the event of a failure of the Core's automated rendezvous system. The belief again is that a component associated with the Core's system on the Poisk module side was responsible for sending erratic signals to the Soyuz spacecraft itself. It is believed that the Core's system on the Soyuz unpiloted MS-14 spacecraft is functioning normally and should be in good shape to enable a smooth and uneventful docking to the aft port of the Zvezda service module on Monday night. A short time ago, after the completion of leak checks and after the Soyuz crew Skvortsov, Parmitano, and Morgan had suited up in their launch and entry suits and completed the successful leak checks to set the stage for undocking coming up a short time from now. Skvortsov radioed back to Russian flight controllers in Korolyov. You see that flight control room in this view. He radioed that the crew is ready to take a short spin. This is the configuration that they're sitting in if you were looking face on to the descent module, with Skvortsov in the commander's seat, the veteran Russian cosmonaut. To his left, in the board engineer number 1 seat, Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency on the right side of your screen. On the left of your screen, to the right of Skvortsov, NASA flight engineer Drew Morgan, who's board engineer number 2. This trio launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome on July 20th. On the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing, for a 4-orbit, 6-hour journey to the International Space Station, docking to the aft port of Zvezda. They had not anticipated that they would be taking another ride in the Soyuz vehicle so soon, but tonight is the night. About a 24-minute operation to undock and maneuver for a redocking to the Poisk module, freeing up the aft port of Zvezda for the arrival tomorrow night, Monday night, of the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 in the next phase of its test flight that will clear the way for the upgraded Sojuz and the 2.1A booster that it was launched on from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan a few days ago to support crew launches beginning next March. While this activity to prepare for tonight's undocking has been ongoing in the Harmony module of the International Space Station throughout the day, Sunday and Sunday evening, NASA astronauts Nick Hague and Christina Cook have been busy packing cargo in the SpaceX Dragon cargo ship that again will be released Tuesday morning from the Canadarm2 robotic arm. It will be mechanically unbolted from the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module from a common berthing mechanism there, and will be maneuvered to a release position. We'll be on the air once again at 9:15 a.m. Central Time, Tuesday morning, 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time, with Dragon release coverage. One other note, just to highlight the accelerated pace of activity for the International Space Station. In the midst of tonight's operations, tomorrow night's return to the station of the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 spacecraft for its second attempt at a docking, and the release of the SpaceX Dragon cargo craft Tuesday morning at the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center in Star City, Russia, outside of Moscow. The next crew to launch to the International Space Station, Soyuz Commander Oleg Skvortsov, NASA astronaut Jessica Meir, and United Arab Emirates spaceflight participant Hazza Ali Al-Mansouri are in the midst of final training at Star City at the Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center there. Later this coming week, they will be participating in their final qualification exams before they travel to the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan on September 10th for their final training exercises prior to their scheduled launch on September 25th. There's a picture of that trio of space travelers, Skvortsov in the center, Jessica Meir on the right, Ali Al-Mansouri on the left. He is flying under a contract between the United Arab Emirates and Roscosmos for an 8-day stay on board the International Space Station. He will return to Earth on October 3rd with NASA astronaut Nick Hague and Russian cosmonaut Alexei Ovchinin. They will be launching on the Sojuz MS-14 spacecraft on the final Sojuz FG booster in the inventory in the final planned launch from Yuri Gagarin's launch pad Site 1 at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. That is currently contemplated for a crew to be launched for spaceflight operations. Everything is in readiness for the initiation of the opening of the hooks holding the Sojuz MS-13 in place at the Zvezda service module's aft docking port. We're anticipating the undocking procedures to begin in about 13 minutes. This is Mission Control Houston. You're looking at a live view of the Russian Mission Control Center in Korolyov outside Moscow. Once again, less than 10 minutes away from the expected undocking of the Sojuz MS-13 spacecraft from the aft port of the Zvezda service module, the first part of a two-night activity to relocate this Sojuz from Zvezda to the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Russian segment of the station, freeing up Zvezda for the reapproach Monday night of the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 spacecraft that was unable to dock to the International Space Station early Saturday morning. Its approach aborted because of a problem, a suspected problem with a component associated with the Corps' automated rendezvous system on the Poisk module. Tonight's relocation of the Sojuz with Alexander Skvortsov, Luca Parmitano, and NASA's Drew Morgan on board does not require a Corps' automated rendezvous system, since the entire activity will be manually flown by Skvortsov as he backs the Sojuz away from Zvezda to a distance of 38 meters. There will be some photos taken of the aft port of Zvezda. The Sojuz will be commanded into a roll, a small rotational maneuver, before Skvortsov begins a translation a short distance above the station to the zenith side of the Russian segment for another period of brief station keeping, so that Russian flight controllers and Skvortsov himself can evaluate the precise alignment of the forward docking probe to the Poisk module before he presses in for a manual docking to Poisk.
Executing R-17.
The station is in the correct undocking orientation. Solar arrays on the Russian segment have been feathered or placed into the proper edge-on orientation to prevent any inadvertent thruster firings to impinge on those delicate solar arrays. So the stage is set for a short flight by 3 of the crew members of Expedition 60 in their Soyuz vehicle. Each of the Russian docking ports at the International Space Station are equipped with a Corps' automated rendezvous system. It is called Corps P, or a passive system. The active Corps system is on the visiting vehicle itself that's approaching for a docking. The 2 Corps systems typically send out signals to one another to provide updated navigational information for that visiting vehicle's navigation systems, the onboard computers, to measure the distance between the approaching vehicle and the docking port and the rate of closure. When an unmanned progress cargo ship is in play, there is a backup rendezvous system called the Toru system, a telerobotically operated rendezvous system that is available for the cosmonauts on board the station to override the automatic Corps system if required, and manually fly the vehicle in for a docking. In the case of a Soyuz piloted vehicle, there is no such Toru system, and in the case of tonight's brief undocking, fly around, and redocking by the MS-13 crew, Skvortsov will be doing all of the driving. He is manually flying the Soyuz away from the station to a position above the Poisk module, and he will fly it in manually for the redocking that is scheduled 24 minutes after undocking.
Confirmed. Kudu repress confirmed. Copy. The speed drift LED is illuminated. The angle rate sensors illuminated. Capture.
The International Space Station currently flying over the Ivory Coast on the west coast of Africa, moving from southwest to northeast. We're about 4.5 minutes away from undocking.
You'll need to switch over to SSVP.
Там есть. Есть инструкция запрета КВ.
Infrared horizon sensor inhibit instruction has been received.
Пока ГСО-1 не наблюдаю.
GSO-1 is not observed yet.
Не наблюдаю ГСО-1.
I don't see attitude control
Продолжаем работать.
System readiness yet.
81. Пошли на РОДК.
Copy. Going to RODK mode. Activating spotlight. Copy. Proceed with steps on page 81.
ДДВ объединенное питание не горит.
A combined power not illuminated.
Принято.
Copy.
Очередная команда.
63300.
Д7 подготовлено.
D7 command is armed. Copy.
Soyuz Commander Alexander Skvortsov, NASA's Drew Morgan, and European Space Agency astronaut Luca Parmitano in their Soyuz launch and entry suits in the descent module, the center section of the Soyuz vehicle, ready to take a short ride away from Zvezda for a redocking to Poisk. This relocation designed to accommodate the return on Monday night of the Sojuz MS-14 unpiloted spacecraft. All three crew members are required to be aboard the Soyuz vehicle for one of these relocation activities. In the unlikely event they would be unable to redock to their new docking port and would have to loiter in orbit until the issue would be resolved, or they would be forced to return home.
Утес, я Утес-1, Москва. Подтверждаете выдачу?
Moscow Utес-1, 63400 is the time when hooks open command should be sent.
Заданное время 06:34.
063400.
Да, приняли. Готовы выдавать команду 7.
Alexander, please be ready to send the hooks open command at that time. Copy. SSVP ready. Command has been sent. Getting ready.
The International Space Station has been placed in free drift, meaning that all thruster activities are disabled for the time being. That will allow no perturbations to the Sojuz MS-13 at the time of undocking. We're standing by for Skvortsov to issue the command to begin a 90-second procedure to open the hooks holding the Soyuz vehicle in place at the moment to the aft docking port on the Zvezda service module.
10 seconds to command.
This view of the engineering data being processed through the Sojuz MS-13.
Выдали команду 634.
63400. Hooks open command has been sent, executed. Hooks closed. Message is no longer illuminated. Going to top of page 82. Copy. Standing by for report that mechanical capture. Message is no longer illuminated on display.
The Sojuz hook's now driving open.
And you're going to start physical separation in manual mode on time. Copy.
Standing by for physical separation now of the Sojuz from the aft port of the Zvezda service module and the start of a 24-minute relocation procedure.
Есть ортопедическое расхождение.
Physical separation confirmed.
The Sojuz has undocked, undocking occurring on time at 10:35 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time as the International Space Station flew over southeastern Algeria. Now flying into an orbital sunrise.
Kind of hard to tell.
You can see the Sojuz backing away ever so slowly at the almost at the middle of your picture here. On the left is the Poisk module that will be the eventual destination for the MS-13 vehicle a short time from now.
Yes, that's R8 command. 8 command. AGC mode has done the trick. The docking interface is clear of any FOD. Let's go to redocking. L1. Activating stabilization. Luca, can you confirm we're in redocking mode? Yep. We're in digital. Copy. Redocking mode confirmed. And activating translation of hand controller.
Alexander Skvortsov, Luca Parmitano, and Drew Morgan getting a bonus ride on their Sojuz MS-13 spacecraft as it slowly backs away from the aft port of the Zvezda service module.
And I'm going to get the target in the center.
Skvortsov is at the control doing the manual flying of Sojuz.
What's your visual on the station? Have a great visual on the station. The docking interface is clear of any FOD, looks very good. Continuing separating from the station. Everything looks good and nominal. Copy. The range is about 9 meters. Copy, Alexander.
That circular dish antenna that you see in the middle of your picture at the aft end of the Zvezda service module is the Lyra antenna. That is their high-gain, high data rate communications antenna that processes television from the Russian segment as well as voice and other high data rate telemetry. The Sojuz slowly backing away from the aft port of Zvezda. That tomorrow night, Monday night, will be the port of call for the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 spacecraft.
We're in the approach quarter. Everything is looking good. And it seems like the sun is about to rise because it looks like the station is getting lit by the rising sun.
Расстояние порядка 20 метров.
Current range is about 20 meters.
Принято 20 метров.
Copy, Alexander. 20 meters.
Again, Skvortsov will back the Sojuz MS-13 away to a distance of about 38 meters or so before he puts the brakes on for a period of station keeping, and he'll command a slight roll program to put the Sojuz in the correct orientation before beginning his brief fly around to reposition the Sojuz to a 38-meter distance away from the Poisk module that you see on the far left of your screen.
25 метров.
Range is 25 meters, Moscow. Copy, Alexander. 25 meters.
This relocation maneuver coming almost 4 years to the day from the last time a station crew executed such a maneuver. Gennady Padalka, Mikhail Kornienko, and Scott Kelly maneuvering their Sojuz TMA-16M spacecraft in the opposite direction, away from Poisk, for a relocation to Zvezda.
Copy, current range 30 meters.
This view now from Sojuz MS-13 telemetry, looking right down the barrel of the Zvezda service module docking port.
Copy that, Alexander.
Выполняю зависание.
Station keeping.
Принято.
Copy.
And the brakes are on. Station keeping has begun.
Зависание.
Station keeping
Разворот по крену.
confirmed. Roll maneuver in progress.
Наблюдаю.
I have a very good visual on MRM2. And the current range is about 30 meters. Copy.
Alexander Skvortsov with very gentle inputs in the hand controller in the descent module, in the Soyuz commander seat, the center seat of the descent module, flanked on his left by Luca Parmitano of the European Space Agency, and on his right by NASA's Drew Morgan.
Оцените дальность.
What would you say
Дальность
the
порядка 32.
current range is, Alexander? I'd say about 32 meters, or thereabouts. Copy.
True.
Skvortsov in the final stages of executing the roll maneuver that will put the Soyuz in the correct orientation to begin his fly around and repositioning of the MS-13 above the Poisk module that you see on the left side of your screen. The International Space Station crossing the Black Sea. Everything proceeding well with this relocation maneuver that will ultimately result in Monday night's return of the unpiloted MS-14 Soyuz vehicle for a docking to that aft port of Zvezda.
Устойчиво наблюдаю станцию, расстояние порядка 30.
The range is about 31 to 32 meters. Have a good visual on the station. I have about 10 more degrees in the roll maneuver left to go.
Готовим вид.
Copy. Standing by for probe extension. Copy.
Skvortsov about to send the command to extend the docking probe on the forward end of the Soyuz vehicle. In the meantime, Russian flight controllers have sent the commands to activate the docking mechanism on the Poisk module.
Разворот по крену выполнен. Выдаем.
Roll maneuver is complete, and we are ready to start probe extension.
Набираю скорость облета.
Copy.
Расстояние 30 метров.
Probe extension command has been sent. Range is 32 meters, and I'm starting to fly around. Copy.
Устойчиво наблюдаю стыковочную ось.
I have a great stable visual of the target.
Все в норме.
Everything's nominal. I copy that, Alexander. Thank you.
Spectacular view of the Sojuz MS-13 beginning its fly around under the control of Alexander Skvortsov, the Soyuz commander. We're in a handover of satellites on our tracking and data relay satellite system. We'll reacquire the downlink video from the station momentarily. Everything proceeding in good fashion with this relocation of the Soyuz from Zvezda to Poisk, opening up the aft port of Zvezda for the return of the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 Monday night.
Начинаю наблюдать Землю.
Starting to get backdrop of Earth in the periscope.
This view over Russian ground stations showing the view from the Soyuz spacecraft as it has initiated the fly around under the control of Alexander Skvortsov. Now a view from a camera on the truss of the International Space Station showing the Soyuz vehicle, its thrusters firing. This is all under the manual control of Skvortsov, a veteran Russian cosmonaut in his third flight into space. The International Space Station, the Sojuz MS-13 flying free for the next several minutes, soon to pass directly over the capital of Kazakhstan, Astana. The Sojuz MS-13 that you see in the field of view, its docking probe now fully extended. Once the Sojuz redocks to the Poisk module, there will be a brief period where relative motion between the Sojuz and the International Space Station will be allowed to dampen out before that docking probe is retracted to basically pull the Sojuz in for a hard dock hard mate to the Poisk docking port itself. That will initiate the closing of the hooks on the Sojuz side. That will be the precursor to about 2 orbits or 3 hours worth of leak checks to make sure we have an airtight seal between Sojuz and Poisk before Skvortsov, Parmitano, and Morgan reopen the hatch to the International Space Station and return to the station itself.
Дальность также сохраняется 35 метров.
The range is still about 35 meters.
Поворот по тангажу практически закончен, осталось немного.
Pitch maneuver is almost complete. Just a little bit more to go.
A Sunday drive for Skvortsov, Parmitano, and Morgan as they are in the process of repositioning the Soyuz away from the Zvezda service module's aft port. Skvortsov manually flying the Sojuz MS-13 to a position about 38 meters directly above the Poisk module on the space-facing side of the Russian segment, where he will stop once again for a brief period of station keeping and a repositioning, a reorientation of the solar arrays through a roll maneuver before pressing in for final approach and docking.
Going along the longitudinal axis of the service module. Copy and we're watching.
Устойчиво наблюдаю станцию.
I have an excellent visual on the station. Copy, Alexander.
Устойчиво наблюдаю МИМ-2, МИ-6.
MRM.
And this view showing the cross-haired engineering camera on the Sojuz MS-13, almost in the center of the crosshairs, the docking port on the Poisk module. Skvortsov reporting a good visual on the docking port itself to Poisk as he fine-tunes the orientation of the Sojuz. There'll be another period of station keeping here momentarily before he presses in for final approach and docking.
Выдаю команда В5. Выдаем команду.
V5 command in work. 065322. V5 command has been sent.
Расстояние 32 метра. Выполняем.
Range is 32 meters.
Начинаем подход.
And we're starting the
Набираем.
final approach, accelerating towards the station. Copy that, Alexander.
With all of the Soyuz systems in good shape, the docking probe that you see at the forward end of the bulbous portion of the Soyuz, that's the orbital module, basically the top portion of the Soyuz itself. The crew is in the center section of the Soyuz in the descent module, Skvortsov, Parmitano, and Morgan. The aft end of the Soyuz, that's the white section with the solar arrays, that's the instrumentation and propulsion module. Final approach initiated by Skvortsov. Everything looking good.
What is the current range, please?
25 метров, да?
25 meters.
Ровно.
Even. Copy.
Восточно наблюдаю стыковочный узел.
I have a great visual on the docking target.
Подтверждаю. Угловым размером мишени.
And the overlay size, square-wise, matches the distance on display. Copy.
Дальность 18 метров.
Range is 18 meters, 1/8.
Выдаем румс импульсный.
Selecting
Выдана команда на рот импульсный.
THC pulse mode. And that's complete. Switch to pulse mode on the translational hand controller.
"260 miles over Mongolia, the Soyuz about 13 meters away from its new port of call, the Poisk module, under the command of Soyuz Commander Alexander Skvortsov. We're in the home stretch of this relocation activity.
Мишень в центре.
Target is at the center.
В норме.
Crosshairs are still aligned. Everything's nominal.
At the time of contact and capture, a few moments from now, the Soyuz will be traveling about 1/10 of a meter per second.
Да, хорошо, принял. Расстояние полторы клетки.
The range is about 9 meters, which is 1.5 squares on the overlay. Copy.
Две клетки, 6 метров.
2 squares on the overlay, 6-meter range. Copy.
Skvortsov, Parmitano, and Morgan almost home to complete this relocation maneuver. About 5 meters now separating the two vehicles.
Готов.
Getting ready for station keeping. Copy. Station keeping confirmed. Copy. Crosshairs are aligned. The target is practically
По курсу довернусь.
dead in the center.
One more opportunity for station keeping to make sure that we have a precise alignment between the Soyuz and Poisk at the bottom of your screen. Skvortsov will reinitiate the final approach for docking
Accelerating to
a moment or two from now,
Copy.
and now pressing in again.
Скорость на сближение набрана.
Closing in. Copy. Standing by for contact.
Standing by for contact and capture of the International Space Station.
Standing by for contact, Moscow. We copy him. Standing by, Alexander. Contact.
Contact confirmed. And capture confirmed. Docking right on time at 10:59 p.m. Central Time, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, as the International Space Station and the Sojuz MS-13 flew just to the east of Beijing. The relocation successful under the control of Soyuz Commander Alexander Skvortsov, a new docking port now for one of the two Soyuzes at the International Space Station.
Translational Command Controller, V8 command, in work.
And the docking probe has now begun to retract.
E18 command, sent. And L2.
At the time of docking, the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 was about 165 miles behind the International Space Station, executing its own program of pre-planned maneuvers to return to the International Space Station Monday night for a automated docking to the aft port of the Zvezda service module that you see in the lower right-hand corner of your screen.
Check D9, Luca.
So a 24-minute maneuver to change parking places at the International Space Station for Alexander Skvortsov, Luca Parmitano, and NASA's Drew Morgan all went as planned. The Sojuz MS-13 now at the Poisk module, setting the stage for tomorrow night's return to the station by the MS-14.
And propellant 476.
Once again, docking occurring at 10:59 p.m. Central Time, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, as the Soyuz and the International Space Station flew 260 miles to the east of Beijing. And the hooks are now driving to form a hard mate between Soyuz and Poisk.
R7 command has been sent and executed. AGC mode disabled. And we're going to turn off the spotlight. That's complete, Moscow. Spotlight is off. Copy.
На время
07 02 30 DMT.
Давление ВСА 767.
Pressure and descent module is 767.
Принято 767.
767, copy. And the orbital module, stand by. Pressure in the orbital module is
763.
763.
В приборном отсеке. No, прибор.
And in the instrumentation compartment?
Нет. 733.
733.
733 принято.
733, copy.
РПВ-1 закрыли, да, Сан Саныч?
And you closed the RPV-1 valve.
Приборно 833.
I'm sorry, that was 833
Приняли.
in the instrumentation compartment.
РПВ-1 закрыт.
Copy. Is RPV-1 closed, Alexander?
РПВ-1 закрыли.
RPV-1 valve?
Принято.
Yes, it is. Copy. Thank you.
Контролируем стягивание по 87 дальше.
Let's continue on page 87
Да, наблюдаем стягивание.
and finish probe retraction. Copy. And we're monitoring probe retraction.
Горит электроразъем, состыкован опрос.
Electrical connectors are mated. Is illuminated. D17 is not illuminated.
Принято. Ожидаем сгорания D15.
Standing by for
Принято, ожидаем.
D15 parameter to be illuminated. Hooks closed. Copy. Standing by.
Идет стягивание, наблюдаем.
Continuing monitoring probe retraction.
As we stand by for confirmation of the closing of the hooks
Extended.
on the Sojuz side of the docking interface with the Poisk module.
No longer on display.
And we now have confirmation that the hooks are closed. So we have a hard mate between the relocated Sojuz MS-13 spacecraft
D15 parameter
and the Poisk module,
is eliminated.
to which the Sojuz flew a short distance around, undocking from the Zvezda service module
Short handover.
to reposition the Sojuz vehicle to Poisk, opening up the aft port of Zvezda for the return to the station Monday night of the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 spacecraft in the next phase of its test flight for use for future crews beginning next spring. The crew on board the MS-13 spacecraft, you see its new home in this updated graphic of the current vehicles at the International Space Station. The crew on board the Soyuz, Skvortsov, Parmitano, and Morgan, now will conduct almost 3 hours, about 2.5 hours worth of leak checks before we have confirmation of an airtight seal. The small vestibule or passageway between Soyuz and Poisk will be repressurized, and the crew will open up the hatches, not just to the Soyuz, but Alexei Ovchinin, the station commander, will open up the Poisk hatch on the station side of the docking interface, and these three crew members, Skvortsov in the middle, Parmitano on your right, Morgan on your left, will return to the International Space Station to resume their normal activities.
Probe latches retracted. Confirmed. Copy. D11 command is next.
Есть штанга СМ втянута D1.
SM probe retracted. Message received. D11 parameter. SSVP mode complete. Also eliminated. Ready to send D8 command. Copy. Go ahead and deactivate SSVP.
The Soyuz systems will be deactivated by Alexander Skvortsov over the course of the next hour.
And that's complete. Command has
all the hooks are closed. Soyuz firmly in the grasp of the International Space Station once again, following a flawless 24-minute relocation from the aft end of the Zvezda service module to the Poisk module. A great view of the
I have a question.
Newly relocated Soyuz vehicle.
Video camera, because I don't see it scheduled anywhere.
Now the attention will turn to the unpiloted Sojuz MS-14 that had to abort its approach for docking to the Poisk module in the wee hours on Saturday. It will return to the station for a docking to the aft port of Zvezda to complete that phase of the journey on its test flight, paving the way for the use of upgraded Soyuz vehicles and a 2.1A Soyuz booster to launch crews to the International Space Station starting next spring.
Утесы, можно выдать команду G4, отключить дисплей трансляции.
And Utesi, you're going to send command G4. Display relay deactivation. Copy and work.
With the Sojuz MS-13 safely nestled into the Poisk module following this relocation this evening, we'll talk for a moment about our coverage over the next 36 hours of more dynamic operations at the International Space Station. Monday night, our coverage will begin at 9:30 p.m. Central Time, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time of the return of the unpiloted MS-14 spacecraft for a docking to the Zvezda service module. Now its docking port vacant thanks to the relocation this evening by the MS-13 crew. Docking Monday night is scheduled at 10:12 p.m. Central Time, 11:12 p.m. Eastern Time. About 11 hours later, the cargo ship, the SpaceX Dragon cargo ship that arrived at the International Space Station in late July, delivering several tons of supplies and scientific experiments. It is being packed. Its hatch will be closed on Monday, ready to be unbolted and released from the International Space Station on Tuesday morning. Our coverage will begin of that Dragon departure activity at 9:15 a.m. Central Time, 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time Tuesday morning. Dragon will be headed for a splashdown later in the day in the Pacific Ocean, some 300 miles southwest of Long Beach, California. Once again, the Sojuz MS-13 with a flawless relocation as Alexander Skvortsov, Luca Parmitano, and Drew Morgan took a short Sunday night spin around the block of the International Space Station, redocking to the Poisk module, setting the stage for the return of an unpiloted Soyuz spacecraft for its own docking on Monday night. So we'll see you back here on Monday evening with coverage of the MS-14's return to the International Space Station. In the meantime, have a good start to your week. This is Mission Control Houston.